If you listen to what His Excellency said in this video, you will quickly realize that we are in a very big problem in the continent of Africa. He is sharing the idea that Mother Nature has blessed the people of Ghana, and the same thing with the rest of the African country when it comes to natural resources. But that has not translated to changing the life of the citizens of those different countries in Africa. And the reason is not far-fetched. There is no way you can change and transform the life of your citizen without producing experts in that particular countries that we take over the affairs of how the resources or raw resources are being managed in that country. Someone rightly said that there are no experts in these countries. Yeah, there are no experts in Africa. Now, there are exceptions to that, but there are no experts when you talk about expertise in a field. What we have is large number of amateurs. And the reason why we are not able to see that we don't have experts in the countries and the continent of Africa is simply the fact that we measure experts based on how many people we've graduated from school, not based on the output that we can see in our countries and our continents. I tell people that if you look closely enough, you find out that the most countries in Africa that have great companies or enterprise that produces things in the continent of Africa, the companies or the enterprise or whatever you can call it are being managed by expatriates, so to speak. So if you think that we have experts, as His Excellency said, because I have to quietly disagree with him on that, we should have transitioned to a first world country with the resources that we have. We are not able to do that because our culture does not permit people to transition from amateur or an average person to becoming an expert in his field. Did you realize that 99% of our graduates never picked up books to read again? Almost 80% of them never deepened their experience in their fields, such as gathering more certifications or learning new skills after years of finishing the school. How do you transition from just being a fresh graduate in the university to becoming an expert? So becoming an expert could take you 10 years to master your fields of endeavor. And then we are people that are so noisy or noisy. When a penny is made here and there, we go about bragging how much we have. And that becomes a focal point for the younger generation behind us. So we do not have the likes of Albert Einstein. We do not have the likes of Newton, Oppenheimer, Bohm, and mention as much as you can. We've not produced that like mind in the continent of Africa. Those are what we call real experts, for they are the initiative that build the Western country, which most of the Asian countries currently are learning and remodeling what they have actually came up with. First thing we need to do if we must develop African countries and continents is to tell ourselves the fact that our learning have not been able to prove that we really did what we actually represent ourselves with over certificate we have. In other words, we have to go back and start to retrain ourselves. It doesn't matter if you are a teacher, it doesn't matter if you're a graduate, it doesn't matter if you have never been to school. There must be a system in place that enable every one of us to relearn what we have learned, because what we have learned in the school system is too small to make us an expert in a field that can transform the society. If we have expertise, as His Excellency rightly pointed out, then what we needed was just 20% of Ghanaians who are real experts in their fields of endeavor to transform the economy of Ghana. We don't need all the Ghanaians, just 20% of them, according to Pareto principle. In other words, if the economy of Ghana is not transformed, we don't have those experts. For instance, most of our leaders in the continent of Africa do not pay attention to learning. They don't depend themselves to resources that teaches an individual or a leader, so to speak, on how to govern nations. An average leader in the continent of Africa is supposed to read at least 56 books in a year, such that if you are going to stay for 4 years in an office, by the time you are exiting, you would have read at least 220 something books. That, in essence, can even take you from being an ordinary leader to becoming an expert as a leader in your field, so that you can see what an average person in your country and your continent cannot see. Because everything around us today is as a result of thoughts. And I tell people often than not that nobody sees with their physical eye. Most of us have been taught that we see with the retinas in our eye, but that is wrong. Every one of us sees based on the walls in our head. And if the walls in your head is not enough to help you see further like an eagle, you can't see any further. And if by default the walls in your head are erroneous, you're going to jeopardize the entire system. So what we need to do in the continent of Africa is to tell ourselves that we need to produce great experts. You see, long time ago, Philippe Emeagwani, who we know is an expert in his field of endeavor because he is encoding the fastest computer in the world, came down to my country, Nigeria, and he provided an advice to some of our leaders that there is something he could do to help them triple the revenue that is being made from oil. But to do such a thing, he needed an investment of, I think, $122 million, if I can remember vividly as I read his article those days. But they told him categorically that there is no such amount of money in the treasury account. In other words, what they are saying is we don't need to advance. They could not see the opportunity that he returned with from the United States of America. So what did he do? He returned where his expertise is valued. He returned to the United States of America. I'm not talking jamboree. Go right now to the internet and research about this. This is a prevailing situation in the continent of Africa because we are sold purely to extractive institutions, not inclusive institutions. If we are really practicing inclusive institution, by now we should have great Nigerian doctors, lawyers, engineers coming back to Africa to help us rebuild the future of Africa. Because with the information we have gathered in Africa is too limited to allow us to compete favorably with the rest of the world. An average graduate in Nigeria should be more or less at the same level with a high school student in the United States of America. So how do you in any way call that an expert? That's a high school graduate. He don't know nothing about how the world is run. Neither do he know deep understanding, or do he have deep understanding about his fields. To get this done, we need great experts that will nurture us in the right direction. If you read the life of J.J. Thomson, he single-handedly trained another 7 Nobel Prize winners because he seems to have understood the principles of how the nature of physics works, and he used it in training his students so they go out there to become first-class students, if I must call them that. For us to rebuild Africa, we must tell ourselves that we need now to reinvest in retraining and re-educating those people we think are experts among us, because they are not truly experts yet. Because to become an expert takes a long time. And most of the time, you need somebody to put you through. And those people with the requisite skills and the knowledge to do these things are not much in number in the continent of Africa. Though we have them, they are residing out of Africa. So we need to invest in them. Go to America. Go to the United Kingdom. Go to France. Go to Germany. Bring back the best brains from Ghana to come and retrain the Ghanaian citizens. Bring back the best brains in Nigeria to come back and retrain the Nigerian citizens. The same should go to Uganda. The same should go to Botswana. The same way should go to every country in the continent of Africa if we must, by all means, develop at the speed of light that the world is moving and be able to compete favorably at the global economy. What builds a nation, we have come to know based on historical evidence, is not resources but culture of a people. Historically, Jewish people have never had no place to stay to use resources to develop themselves. But in every situation they find themselves, they must always find a way to do things that will shape the culture of their people, to introduce them to the limelight. Hence, they compete and win in the race of life. Most of the banking system were introduced by the Jewish people because most of the discipline being practiced those days, they weren't allowed to come into it. So they had to find something else to compensate for that. They went into that. The African people must now begin to pay less attention to the resources that Mother Nature has deposited and pay more attention to the development of character that builds things in the society. Our culture is somehow a little bit deficient when it comes to what developed nation. We may have good culture when it comes to filial piety, respect to the others, but when it comes to culture that enables people to become an expert in the field of science and technology that builds nation, we seem to have failed woefully. And that's what we must do, to look closely into the Western man, what Western people are doing, and take the culture that is advancing them scientifically and then deploy that into our own culture. But whatever every other culture of their people, mean of social culture, whatever, we can leave it with them for our own is advanced love to sustain us. Without this concept, we will never build Africa, and still stand to be corrected with by this solution. Because we are a people who do things thinking that somehow Mother Nature and God is going to send a Messiah to come and save us. No Messiah is coming to save us. Our own Messiah should come from our own initiative. And once that is done, the continent of Africa will be free. And then I say it is more important for Africans to stop paying attention to the resources they have and start paying attention to their character, to their culture that produces every one of us. We have the wealth, but we don't have the great minds that manage the wealth. That is why, on an average, if you look at people who are occupying the political position across the continent of Africa, you cannot in any way differentiate them from a demigod, according to Professor Lumumba. On an average, a senator in my country, Nigeria, is not earning more than 5 million naira in a month. So where do they get these billions and billions that they're dying with? It is culture. And everybody is after the money. They're not after the idea. For the continent to develop, we should have a large percentage of them chasing idea, not chasing money. For money is a byproduct that comes after one has produced an idea that shapes culture and makes happiness out of humanity. Most of the things we use in the continent of Africa have been imported. Raw resources taken away. So an advanced country, refined, produced into a finished product, returned to Africa, and then we buy it, as His Excellency pointed out. The reason is because we don't have expertise to manage those industries. If not, why are we not doing it? And the moment we come close to this reality, everything changes. But you can't in any way see it if you are not well articulated enough. You see, life demands that we wake up from sleep, because the way the culture of our people is designed and the culture of every other person, every people else in the world is that when you are born, you are sleeping. It is through learning that you are awakened. The genius of a man can only be awakened when he is really sold to learning, not when he's sleeping. Large percentage of our youth are geared towards pleasure. I've said this time and time again. You don't become an expert through pleasure. It is through consistent pursuit of knowledge, and not just knowledge, but working knowledge that changes and transforms society. How many average Nigerians, Ghanaians, Senegalese. Have you seen that can say, I have read 2,000 books, 5,000 books, 1,000 books? It is very difficult. So with the 10 books they read in the university is enough. They go about shouting there is no job. An expert is one who looks closely to the situation in the society and provides solution and get rewarded for that. That's how you build a system. If you are an expert and you can't do that, then you are not really an expert. You are just an amateur. We don't have experts, and that's what I wanted to point out in this particular video. And another thing that I would like to say is we should also downgrade the idea of what colonialism has and neo-colonialism has done to Africa. The more we pay attention to that and speak of that, we deepen the wound instead of healing the wound. So an average young person in the continent of Africa is wounded immediately. He sees what happened in Benin Conference because he was not taught the right way. When you read history, you don't read history to become angry of what happened, but to make sure that it never repeats itself. But the problem in the continent of Africa is that the way the history of African people are being introduced to the young Africans is in such a way that stirs conflict, envy, to go out there and fight. But that's not the reason for your reading of history. It's to inspire you to know that something happens to your ancestors that must never repeat itself again. Hence, you have to consistently strategize for the best options to wage war against any inferiority that would come into the system and drag you backward as it did to your ancestors. When history is not approached this way, we become a victim of that history. And that's what is happening to the younger generation of Africa. You go across the internet, you see that we have a lot of them with the name of their pages bearing Africa. Mine is part of them. Hence, my name is Captain Africa. The idea is that the young Africans knew quite all right, deep down their unconscious mind, that there's something wrong with Africa and they want it changed. But the way they are approaching it is in a wrong way. So when you go to the pages, what you see is content being shared about how neo-colonialism plundered Africa, about colonialism plundered Africa, imperialism plundered Africa, and recently about how our leaders are plundering Africa. So they are not well articulate enough to understand that the reason why those things are shown to them is to devise a new solution to solve the problem that that particular incident has produced over time. So what should be in your pages representing Africa should not be what the colonials did or the colonial master did, but the solutions that will solve whatever they did. This can only be realized with well-articulate minds, and we need to be retaught. Today I was reading an article from my mentor, and one of the paragraphs, he made a very clear point that most graduates in my country, Nigeria, are on equal level with a high school graduate in the United States of America. That is not something to debate about. That is a real fact. I know for sure, because we are people that position our mind too much on testing and grading, not on how powerful your idea is and how you have refined that idea over time. On the issue of leadership, our young people are not interested in politics. And those who are interested in politics are the ones who wants to come and amass wealth. We've not been able to teach them that political positions are not for wealth making, but for governance, for service, self-service. You provide yourself selflessly to your country and your continent. I tell people that if God chose you as a leader, you are going to run away from the position of leadership, because the position of leadership is going to strap you off naked, but it's not a place where you can make wealth. You make wealth from consistently providing solution in the job market as an entrepreneur. But a real leader in the continent of Africa must understand that there's no money in leadership. And when this is rightly inculcated in our culture, when young people grow up, you find out that the people you find in the position of leadership are those who are deeply and craving to become part and parcel of the people who bring solution to whatever problem in the society, not those who wants to go there and make money. When you remove this, when there is no money in the field of leadership, everybody runs away. Only the truly chosen one goes into those offices. This is not a big problem. This is a small problem to solve in the society if we can sit down and articulate for ourselves and try to approach it just precept by precept using the law of gradualism and compartmentalization. There is nothing we cannot change in the continent of Africa. This is what I wanted to contribute in what His Excellency said in this video. And if you are really, really happy with what you've learned so far, I would like you to go ahead right now and share this video with your family and friends. And don't forget that I remain Captain Africa. Ad Astra.